Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere warm, a little grimy and surprisingly bubbly, the laundry streets of ancient Rome. You're about to step into the daily rhythm of a city that never really smelled clean, yet somehow invented one of the most effective laundry systems of the ancient world, using pee. Yep, urine. And before you wrinkle your nose too hard, just remember, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes on a Roman street without tripping on a sandal, gagging at the stench, or being side-eyed by a goat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love seeing where you're listening from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through the back alleys of Pompeii. Narrow stone lanes echo under your sandals, and the warm Mediterranean air carries a stew of familiar and not so familiar scents. Olive oil, charred meat, honeyed wine, and something sharply sour. Something uric. You glance around. To your left, a storefront bustles with noise, splashing water, shouting voices, the slop of feet in tubs. You found it. The fullonica, a Roman laundry workshop. Inside, the floor is lined with stone basins, each waist deep and arranged like a bubbly footbath obstacle course. A half-dozen men, tunic hems hitched up, stand in them, their bare legs stained with whatever today's mix contains. They stomp rhythmically, churning a frothy liquid. No, it's not water and soap. It's warm water and urine. Human urine. Often collected from the neighbors or even from public urinals. Welcome to the original industrial-scale dry cleaner. Despite what your modern brain is whispering, this operation is well respected. Essential even. The fullers are skilled tradesmen. Romans took their clothing seriously. Togas, stolas, tunics, all had to be crisp and bright. Dirt, oil, and body grime had to go, and oddly enough, urine turned out to be an incredible degreaser. The building is dim, lit by a high window and a few oil lamps. Everything is stone, floor, vats, countertops, and slick from centuries of scrubbing. You can smell the limestone in the walls and the faint metallic tang of amphorae stacked nearby, which once held perfumes or imported oils. Some of these vessels now store collected contributions from the neighborhood's chamber pots. A fuller waves you over, his face red with effort. He gestures toward a corner where freshly washed garments hang to dry, swaying slightly in the breeze from a side opening. Some are bright white, bleached with sulfur fumes in a later step. Others are colored tunics, neatly pressed and folded. Roman fashion wasn't just about white robes. Colored garments signaled everything from social rank to personality. Don't even think about wearing purple unless you're close to the emperor. Now, if you look closely at the ground, you'll see runnels carved into the floor, stone channels that carry excess liquid out of the vats and toward the street gutter. Which means yes, the very roads you just walked in on. Probably lightly rinsed with second-hand pee and lye water. So maybe don't lick your sandal. The fuller's assistant, a younger boy with stained hands, opens a clay jar and pours in more liquid, today's detergent. It sloshes, sharp-smelling and potent. That's the secret ingredient, ammonia. Urine, when aged just right, becomes a powerhouse cleaner. The Romans didn't know the chemistry, of course, but they knew what worked. Historians still argue whether they discovered this by accident or by sheer desperation. One theory suggests that sheep fleece workers noticed how easier it was to clean wool with human waste. Another proposes someone just got tired of dirty tunics and started experimenting. Either way, here we are. Just outside the fullonica, there's a small courtyard. Here, finished garments are laid out in the sun, carefully arranged for maximum drying. In one corner, two workers handle what looks like clay powder, fuller's earth, a natural absorbent that helps strip out oils and odors. They'll dust it on garments after washing and then brush it off after a good shake. Think of it like the Roman version of fabric softener, only grittier. And while this may all seem lowbrow, don't let the smells fool you. Some fullers made serious coin. A successful workshop could take contracts from elite households, temples, and even public officials. Clean garments meant status, and fullers were the invisible hands behind that polished image. In fact, some even had shrines to Minerva or Mercury in their shops, hoping for divine favor in their daily suds and stomping. But not everyone respected them. The Roman satirist Martial once quipped about clothes coming back dirtier than before. And Pliny the Elder? He had opinions, especially about the smell. Yet here you are, watching the process play out under torchlight and shadows, as the day winds down and the final garments are wrung out. Even now, in this oddly meditative space of sloshing, scrubbing, and scraping, there's a quiet rhythm. You might notice the soft splash of the workers' feet, the rustle of linen against limestone, and the occasional hum of a tired voice. The fuller nearest to you lets out a yawn and stretches his back. Another reaches for a flask of watered wine. The work is relentless, yes, but it's familiar, ritualized, almost relaxing if you ignore the set. So you lean against the doorway, arms crossed, watching ancient laundry unfold like an everyday miracle. In the heart of an empire fueled by marble, war, and gods, it's these tiny, smelly tasks that hold everything together. You lean in just a little as the fuller tips the jar. The pale yellow liquid pours into the stone basin with a soft splash, mixing into the warm water already swirling at the worker's feet. It's a strange thing to witness, watching a grown man stomp laundry in other people's bodily fluids. But here in the Roman world, this is just another Tuesday. Why P? The short answer? Chemistry, though the Romans didn't call it that. They called it lodium, and it was liquid gold for the laundry trade. What you're watching is more than scrubbing. It's science, ancient style. The real cleaning agent here is ammonia, which forms naturally as urine ages and breaks down. It's a powerful alkaline that can lift grease, strip oil, and brighten whites far better than just water and elbow grease alone. Now, you probably haven't spent much time evaluating the detergent section of ancient markets. But for Romans, their options were, well, limited. Soap as we know it didn't exist yet, at least not in a form that worked well on fine fabrics. What did exist was knowledge passed down from generations. Animal fats boiled with ash or various mixtures of clay and sand. But none of those quite matched the reliable power of aged pea. The fullers knew this from experience. You watch one of them now, his palms stained a dull beige as he rubs a tunic between his hands. The tunic is stiff with days-old grime, its folds lined with the sweat and soot of Rome's busy streets. He dips it, soaks it, lifts it again. You can hear the suck and pull of fabric through liquid. The whole basin smells sour, yes, but not like rot. It's sharper, clean in a strange way. You remind yourself, this is peak Roman cleanliness. It's worth noting that Romans didn't just use any old pee. There was a difference between fresh and stale urine. The best batches had been left to sit out for days, sometimes weeks, to reach optimal ammonia levels. That's when it went from bodily waste to full-blown cleanser. And because this wasn't exactly something you could buy bottled, the fullers had to source it themselves. That's where the Roman public urinals came in, stone or bronze jars placed on street corners, in alleys, and even outside taverns. Passers-by were encouraged to relieve themselves, and the fullers would later collect the contents for use. You can picture it, a man in a rough tunic hauling full amphorae of stranger pee down the road like a milkman with a particularly tragic job. And believe it or not, this led to attacks. Enter Emperor Vespasian, ruler of Rome in the late 1st century CE, and a man known more for pragmatism than charm. Seeing that fullers profited off this abundant natural resource, he imposed a urine tax, known as the vectigal urine. If you wanted to collect from the public pots, you had to pay up. There's even a story of his son, Titus, wrinkling his nose at the idea, only for Vespasian to hold a coin to his nose and ask, "Do you smell anything?" The phrase pecunia non olet, money doesn't stink, was born. You're beginning to appreciate just how central this substance was to daily Roman life. But it wasn't just laundry. Urine was also used in leather tanning, teeth whitening, yes, you heard that right, and even as a basic antiseptic. The line between gross and useful was much blurrier back then. Historians still argue whether the Romans fully understood the chemical processes at play or if they simply followed empirical results. After all, when your tunic came back 3 shades brighter, did it really matter why? Back inside the fullonica, you watch another step unfold. One worker lifts a tunic from the basin and wrings it out, twisting hard. The fibers stretch and groan under the pressure. Then he tosses it to another man, who dunks it into a secondary rinse vat, this one with water and ash, likely to neutralize the acidity and strip lingering odor. It's a delicate balance. Too much ash and the fabric weakens. Too little and you smell like the latrine behind a tavern. And yet, for all its strange ingredients, the process works. You see it in the finished pile. Bright tunics, white stolas, soft wool cloaks. Some have even been pressed using heated stones, laid over flat surfaces to create pleats and folds. The final product doesn't carry the scent you'd expect. Instead, it's earthy, sun-baked, maybe slightly acrid, but undeniably clean. In Roman terms, pristine. Nearby, someone drops a small pouch into the rinse basin, a mix of herbs, perhaps. Lavender, rosemary, or crushed bay leaf. Romans loved fragrances and often finished their laundry with natural scents to cover up any remaining sharpness. The fullers weren't barbarians. They knew you couldn't show up to a dinner party smelling like the public latrine. Still, not everyone approved. There were critics, as there always are. The philosopher Seneca once lamented the decay of Roman values, linking even the laundry process to moral decline. When our garments are cleansed with filth, he wrote, so too are our souls. Or something dramatically grumpy like that. But here's the kicker, these fullers were essential. Without them, Rome would stink even more than it already did. They were the invisible backbone of textile life, part laundromat, part chemist, part artist. And all powered by the one thing every Roman could provide, for free. You watch one last time as a fresh load is dunked into the golden vat. A new batch of tunics is tossed in, and the stomping begins again. The rhythm is almost musical. Slosh, stomp, squish, breathe. Slosh, stomp, squish. You can see how a long day here might numb the senses, maybe even lull you into a strange peace. You imagine yourself slipping into that same rhythm. Your mind wanders. Somewhere outside, the sun is setting over tiled rooftops and crumbling columns. The air is warm. And in this quiet little fullonica, ancient laundry bubbles on. The man nearest you looks tired. His tunic, already frayed at the edges, is soaked halfway to his thighs. You watch as he lifts his foot, pauses just briefly, then plunges it back down with a squelch into the basin of yellowed liquid and soapy fabric. His soles are calloused. His toes, wrinkled from standing hours in a bath of someone else's waste. This is not a glamorous job. But then again, in ancient Rome, most weren't. These are the full ones, or fullers, and they are the human engines behind Rome's massive laundry industry. You glance around and count at least 8 of them in this small fullonica. Some stomp, some scrub, some rinse, some hang fabric across thick ropes stretched between beams. It's loud with movement, but not conversation. These men are here to work, not chat. The air is heavy with heat and ammonia, and it catches in your throat. You can almost taste it. Being a fuller was not exactly a childhood dream. These were the kinds of jobs that often fell to freedmen, immigrants, or the desperate. A mix of former slaves trying to make a living and citizens born into trades too lowly for patrician taste. Yet, despite the low status and the very unsanitary work, fullers were everywhere, and essential. Rome, in all its grandeur, still needed clean togas. And make no mistake, Romans were obsessed with appearances. A white, sharply pleated toga was a symbol of status, purity, and social grace. No self-respecting citizen would show up at the forum in a stained garment. The fuller then wasn't just a laundry man. He was a restorer of dignity, a guardian of Roman respectability, with extremely smelly feet. You notice a boy in the corner, probably no older than 10, running errands. He dashes back and forth carrying buckets, collecting spent herbs, emptying runoff from the rinse vats. His hands are raw, his nose red. Apprenticeship started young. Some of these children would learn every aspect of the job and one day open their own fullonica. Others wouldn't last a season before their lungs gave out or their feet cracked open beyond healing. That stomping we mentioned? That's just step 1. After garments were soaked and squished in the initial vat of ammonia-rich urine, they were transferred to rinse tanks, then scrubbed on rough boards or pounded with wooden paddles. Some fullers had to climb onto giant stones just to get leverage. One wrong move and you'd slip face first into the murky mix below. And no, they didn't have extra tunics waiting in the back. What's astonishing is how organized all of this was. Rome had trade guilds, even for laundry. The Collegium Fullonum regulated the profession, setting standards and, in some cases, representing the fullers legally and politically. There were even festivals dedicated to Minerva, the goddess of crafts and labor, where fullers would parade with pride through the streets. Try wrapping your head around that, a group of men who stomped in other people's pee getting their own celebratory march. You might also spot a fuller using a special tool now, something like a brush but wider and flatter. It's made of reeds bound tightly together. This would be for beating the dust out of thicker cloaks or woolen garments before soaking. Some garments were so stiff with grime that they needed to be basically tenderized before cleaning. As you linger, one fuller beckons you closer, not with words but with a jerk of his chin. He's holding up a toga, freshly rinsed, examining it in the light. The cloth shines slightly as if blessed by sunlight and sweat. You reach out hesitantly and feel its texture, surprisingly soft. You think again about what it just endured to get to this point, and you can't help but feel a little reverence. It's a minor miracle. But the fullers didn't just clean clothes, they finished them. And that meant brushing, folding, and sometimes even dyeing. Certain fullonicae offered full services, from washing to reshaping, pressing, and scenting. In fact, this final stage of pressing was often done with heated metal rods or smooth stones, gently ironed over folds to achieve that crisp Roman look. You can almost hear the sizzle as fabric meets heat. Let's not forget the hazards of the job. Constant exposure to ammonia could damage the lungs and eyes. Standing barefoot in vats of urine and ash led to chronic infections and painful skin conditions. And don't even get started on what happened when someone slipped on a slick stone floor mid-shift. There were no workplace injury reports. No fullonica health plan. If you got hurt, someone else took your place. And yet, there was pride. Some fuller families passed the trade down for generations. There's graffiti in Pompeii proudly advertising, "I, Stephanus the Fuller, washed the toga of the magistrate himself." That was status in the laundry world. Cleaning a senator's garments meant trust, respect, maybe even a decent tip. Historians still debate just how centralized or independent Fullonicae were across the Roman Empire. Were they state-regulated? Private? Family-run? The answer seems to vary by city. In Pompeii alone, we've uncovered over a dozen Fullonicae, some modest backyard setups, others elaborate multi-roomed complexes with vaulted ceilings, mosaic floors, and full drainage systems. That tells you how profitable this business could be. And here's one more oddity before we wrap. Some fullers had superstitions, like hanging tiny charms, often shaped like eyes, hands, or phalluses, above their workstations to ward off bad luck. After all, if your livelihood depended on strangers peeing in pots, you needed all the protection you could get. You step back from the basin and glance around one last time. The fullers are still working, quiet, rhythmic, persistent. Their lives don't make the history books, but their footprints, bare, stained, human, are quite literally soaked into the fabric of Roman life. Just as you're getting used to the steamy din of the fullonica, the smell begins to trail beyond the walls. You step outside, expecting some fresh air. No. The stench follows you, sharper now, laced with sour notes and something oddly metallic. You sniff once, regret it immediately, and keep walking. Welcome to the Roman street economy. Here, even your bodily waste has a price tag. It begins, curiously enough, with a jar. All along the alleyways, tucked at regular intervals near taverns, bathhouses, or simply roadside walls, are large ceramic vessels called dolium urine. These are not trash bins. They're part of Rome's public pee collection system. If you needed to relieve yourself and you weren't near a latrine or willing to pay for a bathhouse stall, well, there was a jar for that. And people used them. Casually. Frequently. Usually while making direct eye contact with horrified passersby. Now here's where it gets profitable. Enterprising fullers or city contractors would collect the urine from these dolia and cart it back to local Fullonicae. Why buy when the streets gave it freely? Of course, quality varied. Urine that had sat fermenting for days in the sun was less effective. But in a pinch, anything with ammonia would do. And remember, these vats weren't only used once. They were strained, sometimes filtered through cloth, but rarely wasted. Then came Vespasian. You may know him as the emperor who helped rebuild Rome's economy after Nero's chaos. But around 70 CE, Vespasian noticed something that smelled like opportunity. Specifically pee. With fullers scooping up free liquid gold and turning it into clean garments and decent money, Vespasian figured it was time to get the state involved. So he introduced the vectigal urine, a urine tax. Yes, the Roman government literally taxed your pee. It worked like this. The tax wasn't levied on individuals doing the peeing, but rather on those collecting and reselling the urine. So if you ran a fullonica and had your workers harvesting the dolia from around town, you'd be expected to pay a small fee to the empire. And just like that, human waste became taxable income. Naturally, not everyone loved the idea. There's a famous and mildly hilarious moment where Vespasian's own son, Titus, scolded him about the distastefulness of taxing such a disgusting thing. In response, Vespasian held a coin to his nose and asked whether it smelled. Titus admitted that it didn't. And yet, Vespasian replied, "It comes from urine." Thus was born the phrase pecunia non olet. Money doesn't stink. That little proverb became Rome's defense of practical profit. If it makes money, who cares where it came from? As you stroll through the streets, you start noticing how integrated this collection economy really is. Some dolia are clearly labeled with little reliefs or inscriptions, marking their intended use. Others are just wide, unmarked pots whose pungency gives them away. And yes, the ground around them is often slick. You begin watching your step very carefully. Interestingly, some fullers even paid local taverns or public baths to reserve their dolia spots. Think of it like buying ad space, except your logo is next to a communal urinal. These arrangements helped ensure a steady supply of fresh urine. In high-demand seasons, before big festivals or elections, competition for good collection sites got fierce. You turn down a wider street now, one that bustles with carts and shouting vendors. This is no back alley scene. It's central Rome and it still smells off. Not overwhelming, just ever present. The mixture of spices, sweat, animal dung, and public pee creates a signature Roman street scent. Tourists from the provinces probably gagged. Locals? They barely noticed. Historians still argue whether these urine dolia were regularly emptied by city sanitation crews or whether fullers had to handle it all privately. The lack of consistent record-keeping means we're left guessing. What's certain is that no one viewed this as strange. Urine was simply one of many substances the Romans reused. Others included ashes, sand, vinegar, even crushed snails. You pause near a bustling corner and notice something even more curious. A taberna, a small shop, selling ready-made urine mixtures. Some were aged for extra strength. Others had added herbs to reduce the smell or improve the fabric brightening effects. Roman chemistry, it turns out, was inventive and deeply committed to making the most out of very little. And here's another quirky tidbit. Elite households sometimes donated their family's urine to favorite laundries, like a VIP club of waste. Contributing to a prominent fullonica could earn you social credit, especially if that establishment handled senatorial garments or state togas. You imagine a world where gift baskets are replaced with amphorae full of premium household pee. A golden gesture indeed. But this whole system, the jars, the taxes, the neighborhood deals, depended on something you're still trying to get used to: Rome's fearless pragmatism. There was no squeamishness. Bodily functions weren't taboo, they were useful. Everything had a place in the cycle of production. Even the street layout reflected this. Many roads sloped slightly inward to collect runoff, including rain, animal waste, and yes, spillage from dolia. It pooled towards central drains called cloacae, connected to larger sewers like the famous Cloaca Maxima. These helped minimize flooding and diluted some of the worst smells. But not all. You pass one drain and nearly choke. As the sun begins to dip, the city shifts pace. Workers hurry home. Taverns grow louder. And you can't help but wonder how anyone ever slept here. Yet sleep they did. Romans grew up with the smells of their streets, just as you grow used to the low hum of your refrigerator back home. Eventually, even pee fades into the background. By now, your nostrils have adjusted, more or less. The air still tingles with the tang of ammonia and old wool, but there's a new scent riding the breeze. Something earthy, almost chalky. You follow it around the back of the fullonica, where things are quieter, more methodical. Here, the focus shifts from stomping and scrubbing to the finer art of fashion restoration. It's Roman fabric care, deluxe edition. You watch as a young fuller gently lifts a dripping tunic, just washed in yesterday's best batch of urine, and begins patting it dry. Not wringing. Not twisting. Patting. Romans weren't reckless with clothes, especially when the cloth was dyed, delicate, or destined for someone important. Linen and wool dominated wardrobes, but their quality varied and dyes weren't cheap. A toga praetexta, that's the white toga with a purple border worn by magistrates, required meticulous attention. One splash of unfiltered clay or an overvigorous scrub, and you'd have an angry patrician at your doorstep. So how did they soften those itchy, stiff fibers? Clay. Not just any clay though. The fuller dips into a bin filled with fine, pale powder. Fuller's earth, a naturally occurring substance rich in aluminum silicates. This wasn't some ancient accident. It was intentional, practiced, and refined. They used it as a natural absorbent, a deodorizer, and yes, a sort of proto-fabric softener. After washing, the garments were patted or dusted with the clay, which helped lift residual oils and odors and left the cloth with a smoother, more comfortable texture. You reach out and touch a finished tunic nearby. It's surprisingly soft. No hint of the pungent process it's endured. A quiet miracle. Of course, not all garments were created equal. Everyday tunics were treated efficiently, quick wash, stomp, clay dry. But clients who paid more expected flair. That meant brushing fabrics to raise the nap, sometimes with teasel heads or special combs. It meant treating reds with extra mordant so the dye wouldn't fade in sunlight. And it meant using smoke. Yes, smoke. Some dyes responded well to being smoked over fragrant fires, usually made from damp wood or specific herbs. This wasn't for scent, although it helped. It was for color fastness. The heat helped set the dye, much like heat-setting modern screen prints. The fuller you're watching right now adjusts a cloth over a brazier and hums softly, like it's just another Tuesday. Which, for them, it is. Across the room, another worker is kneeling with a basket of mismatched cloths. Some blue, some saffron yellow, others that strange reddish-brown Romans seem to love. They're all going through finishing. This involved stretching garments on wooden frames, called tendera, to prevent shrinking and warping. They'd adjust the cloth with small hooks, tightening the weave like a painter prepping a canvas. Then came the brushing, the clay, the folding, and finally, the pressing. Yes, pressing. Roman fullers had something akin to an ancient dry cleaner's iron. Heavy stones or weighted planks used to flatten wrinkles. Some even used heated bricks wrapped in cloth to gently warm and press more delicate pieces. It's a strange mental image, one man stomping in a vat of urine while another carefully folds a senator's tunic like origami. But that was Rome. Brutal and refined all at once. There's also the matter of smell, still a concern even post-clay. So some fullers had sent tricks. A few sprinkled dried lavender or myrtle leaves into garment folds. Others perfumed the clay itself before application. Remember, this wasn't just about utility. It was customer service. The difference between a musty tunic and one that smelled faintly of hillside herbs could be a returning client. Unless you think Romans were above fashion fads. Oh, they weren't. The wealthy flaunted sheer linens imported from Egypt, deep indigos from India, and Tyrian purple from Phoenicia, which was so prized it could outvalue gold. Handling these luxuries required not only care but political connections. Some fullonica worked almost exclusively with the elite, taking on apprentices and guards to ensure their clients' wardrobe secrets didn't become street gossip. After all, your wardrobe said everything about your status, even your moral character. The philosopher Seneca once scolded a man for wearing too many pastel tones. It was apparently unbecoming of a Roman citizen. Historians still debate whether fullers doubled as minor tailors or repairmen. Some inscriptions suggest they did basic stitching. Others argue that was the domain of separate trades. But one thing's certain, the fuller was a finishing artist. They weren't just washing clothes. They were crafting the final, wearable version of someone's public self. You wander over to a sun-drenched corner of the fullonica courtyard. Clotheslines stretch in neat rows, and tunics sway gently in the breeze, catching the last golden light. It's almost beautiful. The earthy smell of the clay, the faint smoke from dye-setting fires, the rhythmic sound of brushing. It's unexpectedly calming. And then, just as you're almost lulled into relaxation, someone knocks over a vat of wastewater behind you. Splash. You flinch, leap back, and realize with a grimace, you've got Roman laundry on your sandals. Again. Still, it's hard not to admire the craft, the dedication, the sheer resourcefulness of people who turned dirt, clay, and bodily fluids into a viable business model. You picture a Roman noble slipping on a freshly softened toga, none the wiser about the stomping, brushing, and clay dusting it took to get there. And as one fuller hangs the last tunic of the day, he nods at you without a word, wipes his clay-covered hands, and returns inside. You linger a little longer, watching as the fullonica winds down. Workers stretch sore backs, scrape clay from fingernails, and scoop the day's wastewater into a trench that, mercifully, flows away from the city center. Rome was nothing if not practical about its smells. But as you take one last look around, something begins to tug at the back of your mind. Despite all the care and labor, just how effective was this method? Well, turns out, not everyone in ancient Rome was impressed by the fuller's efforts. The poet Martial, known for his biting wit, once mocked a man's tunic for smelling like it had been scrubbed by a drunk goat, a not-so-subtle jab at both the fullers and their famously fragrant detergent. Others complained about stiff hems, uneven colors, or clay residue left behind after pressing. One unlucky senator supposedly blamed a fuller for a toga that fell apart mid-speech, an early wardrobe malfunction with social consequences. You realize that for every grateful client, there were critics. Romans who doubted the cleanliness of clothes washed in public urine vats and sun-dried in open courtyards. Some found the practice downright unseemly. And it wasn't just elite snobbery. Sanitation was a real concern, even in a world where chamber pots and bathhouses shared close quarters. Still, the fullers had their defenders. Pliny the Elder, Rome's encyclopedic uncle figure, wrote earnestly about the power of natural substances, especially urine, to break down grime and grease. He noted its effectiveness on wool, its interaction with fuller's earth, and its surprising role in preserving vibrant dyes. He even suggested that certain types of urine were better than others, depending on diet and time of day. Yes, ancient dry cleaning got that specific. But historians today remain divided. Some argue Roman laundry was more about appearance than hygiene, that clothes were visibly clean, but not necessarily disinfected by modern standards. Others suggest the combination of alkaline urine, clay, smoke, and sun offered a decently thorough cleaning process. One 21st century textile scientist even attempted to replicate the fullonica method and found the results mixed. Less about sparkling freshness, more about adequate deodorization. which feels like a generous phrase. And then there's the bigger question: why did the system disappear? When the Western Roman Empire crumbled, so too did the fullonica. Some techniques survived through monastic traditions or Byzantine adaptations, but most of the know-how vanished like steam off a laundry vat. Medieval Europe turned instead to soapwort and lye. Fuller's earth remained in use, but its connection to pea-based cleaning quietly faded. Some scholars believe Christianity's changing views on bodily functions helped push urine washing into the taboo pile. Others point to shifting economies. Urban laundry industries just didn't hold up when centralized cities collapsed. But whatever the reason, by the time the Renaissance rolled around, no one was stomping in tubs of human waste to brighten their tunics. It was over. Yet the legacy of the Fullers lingers. You see it in the language. Fulling still means cleaning and thickening wool. You see it in archaeological digs where ancient fullonica are among the best preserved industrial sites in Pompeii and Ostia, complete with vats, presses, and clay bins. And you see it, unexpectedly, in the cultural persistence of PS product. Did you know that as late as the 17th century, people in parts of Europe still used urine to whiten teeth and bleach hair? It wasn't just the Romans. They were just the most unapologetically organized about it. You shift on your feet, now standing outside the fullonica, staring up at the dusky Roman sky. The din has faded. The workers have gone home. And you can't help but wonder, what else have we forgotten? What other strange, effective, eyebrow-raising habits once kept this sprawling empire humming along? Historians still argue whether the Fullers were true artisans or just survival-driven laborers. Whether their processes were rooted in science or superstition. Whether their vats of urine were a marvel of chemistry or just another symptom of Roman excess. But one thing's for sure. You'll never look at your washing machine the same way again. And now, as the Roman streets dim and the last tunic dries on its frame, you feel the weight of time settle in like a warm blanket. The bustle of the fullonica fades into the background, replaced by soft echoes of laughter, of clay being swept, of sandals against stone. The city exhales, and so do you. The smells of the day, sharp, earthy, even strangely comforting, dissolve into the still evening air. Stars blink gently overhead, just as they did over these ancient alleyways thousands of years ago. The workers sleep, the vats rest, and the moon climbs a little higher. Let your thoughts drift now, gently, like a tunic swaying on the line. You've walked the streets of old Rome, stepped in odd puddles, and peered into lives that history almost forgot. The night is long, the world is quiet, and your story is done.